what really impacts confidence. So once I started diving through the research on understanding, based on science, what really is confidence, how does it impact us, and what can we do to really build it? And there's 5 kind of core skills. We need the 5 core skills, spells the acronym CARD. C stands for communication, A stands for attitude and goal setting, R stands for our relationship skills, D stands for our decision-making and self-discipline skills, and S stands for our stress and emotion management skills.
You talk a lot about confidence. And
Mhm.
when we talk about the middle chair, and I want you to really define this because I think it's really important. But it was so interesting to me because I was going back through my life and evaluating, okay, when did I feel confident? And as a teenager and in young adulthood, so many of us battle between the chairs, between
Yes,
the concept. And so as I was thinking the secret ingredient that you talk about is confidence, I'd
yes,
love for you to share why confidence matters and a little bit about the 3 chairs because I think people need to understand
sure.
that beautiful breakthrough.
Yeah, thank you so much. So a little bit about my background. I've been doing this work for over 25 years. I'm a leadership and relationship expert. My doctor's in marriage and family. I'm still a registered therapist. People actually are very curious about my educational background. So I'm a mental health professional, but I'm also a leadership expert. And the reason that I share that is because when we're talking about confidence and we're talking about relationship and leadership, it's really kind of put me in this very unique space where I can actually talk about all of it. I'm my expertise is very wide and it's actually very deep. So I started my work over 25 years ago, coming up on 30 years. And I just finished my master's in counseling, and eventually I did my doctorate in marriage and family. But at the time, I started a counseling practice with teenagers. I was very young. I was 22 years old at the time. Put up my shingle, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to start my first business. And I was asked by a local doctor to set up a practice within his medical office, and I didn't realize at the time of how big of a deal that was. There was 200 doctors that heard a new counselor in town who actually loves young people. So my practice exploded very quickly working with teenagers. So that's kind of how it started. I learned very quickly that the topic of teens struggled a lot with confidence and anxiety. So I came up with this concept of the 3 chairs, which I'll share in just a second, and then did that for the first 10 years. And then by this point in Canada, I was getting a lot of companies sponsoring my work to travel and speak across the country on parenting topics. Teenagers grew up, they turned into millennials. Millennials entered the workforce 15, 20 years ago. So those same companies started asking me to transfer the knowledge I need from family systems into organizations. So now we work with leaders around the world. We have a leadership coaching company that has really exploded over the last several years. And so this topic is so exciting to me. And so everybody listening, whether or not you're an entrepreneur, you're a mom, you're a dad, you're a manager, you're a professional, you will get so much out of this conversation because it's just one of those beautiful topics that transcends for all of us. So, okay, so the topic of the 3 chairs. So, if you've seen my TED Talk, and thank you, Scott, so much for sharing the link to the TED Talk. That is so kind of you, and I'm glad you saw so much value of it. So, if you've seen my TED Talk, you'll know the story that it started because my this one particular day in my practice, I had all these teenagers come in and they start talking about how they don't like themselves, they don't feel good about themselves. And it was just my one client. She just said to me, she goes, Karen, nothing's being done about this in my school. And it was the way that she said it to me. I knew that was my purpose. So when you talk about your acronym, by the way, which I love, um, impact. That became my purpose. My purpose, and I'm faith-based as well. So I just love your acronym. I think you and I are just there's so much great alignment in terms of our belief system and philosophy. So I'm a person of faith as well, but my purpose really was around how can I help young people love themselves more authentically. So that became very much of my purpose. Started getting digging into all the research around the different mindsets and understood going through research that there's really 3 fundamental attitudes that we all have. So I'm a visual learner. Are you what kind of learner are you, Scott? Are you visual, kinesthetic, auditory?
I would say probably visual,
Yeah.
but I definitely am I'm a mix. It's probably the ADHD. I like
Yeah.
everything, so sometimes I learn really great by listening.
Sure.
Sometimes I really need visual. So
Okay.
I mean, I'm open to any way to learn as long as
Any
I'm
way to
learning
learn.
and
All
growing.
right. Okay, so, I'm visual. I'm off the charts visual, and in the TED Talk, I talk about how I was diagnosed with a learning disability, very severe learning disability, and told by a clinical psychologist that I'd never be able to finish high school. So, for anybody who has a child that has any kind of quote unquote disability or difference, don't let anybody tell you what you cannot do. So anyway, all that to say, I'm a visual learner, which is where the 3 chairs came up with. So this is for everybody who's a visual learner. There you go. I'm a visual I need to see a visual. So once I started diving through the research on understanding, based on science, what really impacts confidence? This is what I want to figure out. I want to understand what really is confidence, how does it impact us, and what can we do to really build it? So when I started kind of really unpacking all the research, I identified that there was really 3 main patterns. But I thought I was speaking to teenagers, it's like almost 30 years ago. I'm like, they're not going to listen to that. They have to have it fun, right? Like for anybody who wants to be a speaker, I always say, if you want to be a speaker, see if you can survive a high school assembly. And if you can survive, you're going to be fine. So I thought, how do I make this really come alive? So I thought I'm gonna do it in a skit. So I begged a high school to take me up on it. Principal said, "Yes, what do you need?" I said, "I need a full high school assembly and I need 3 chairs on the stage and I need 3 actors that can do improv." So that's where my whole concept of the 3 chairs came up with. And once I saw the first time students acted it out, I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is gonna work." Like, so scary, but it works. So here's what the 3 chairs are, everybody. I'm gonna go through it really quick, high level, then we're gonna kind of unpack how this impacts every single one of us on the call. Doesn't matter our age, our title, our education, doesn't matter. This is gonna impact all of us. So, the person who kind of sits in the left chair is what I call the blind attitude. This is the person that they're really tough on themselves. They're tough, they're critical. They're a lot of times they have the imposter syndrome. They may come across really positive and really confident, but behind that mask, they struggle deeply with insecurity. Okay, so that's what I call the blind attitude. The one in the right chair is what I call the arrogant attitude. This is the person that is really cocky. They're arrogant. They're full of themselves. They're going to put people down. They don't care how it impacts other people. And then we've got the middle chair, and the middle chair is the confident attitude, and that's the person that really feels good about themselves. They feel good about themselves. They feel a sense of confidence, but they're not arrogant. So they know a lot, but they don't know everything, and so they have this beautiful sense of confidence with themselves. Understanding the 3 chairs is pretty interesting. Kindergarten kids can get it. It's pretty interesting. Where it gets fascinating is based on science. If somebody says to me, "Okay, Karen, I'm a 30-year-old stay-at-home mom, and I see myself sitting in that left chair," I can make very strong predictions on how she is making decisions based on that mindset. Same thing if I'm working with a CEO who says, I kind of see myself sitting in this chair. I can make very strong predictions based on science on what kind of decisions they're making because of that mindset. And so that's where the power is on the 3 chairs, not just understanding with what the 3 mindsets are, but understanding that where we sit highly impacts our decision making, from communication, who we choose as our friends, how we deal with conflict, how we set goals, how it impacts our mental health. That's where it gets really interesting. And the back of the book, I think it's got like 20 pages or, lots of pages on all based on science, the predictions we can actually make based with where people are sitting. So the first step is understanding the chairs, then the mindset. The second is understanding the impact. And the third step is then how we get ourselves all in the middle chair, because this is learned. It is not genetic, which is why I love this topic so
Yeah,
much.
and you go from chair to chair at different stages of
Yes.
life. I think it's really interesting to understand the research and start to look at that because there are times in our lives where we feel like we've hit a plateau of success
Yes.
or comfort or confidence and there's
Yes.
this peace that comes over you, but then something happens in your life that's completely unique or different and you feel really maybe out of control, maybe uncomfortable, maybe you feel like you don't know the answers. And we all go
Yes.
through these things. And so it's very natural to go from chair to chair, but we really want to spend as much time as we can in that middle chair, in that confident,
Correct.
comfortable chair where we're not afraid of feedback. We're not afraid of
Right.
people helping us be better. We're learning and growing every day. And I really love that part
Mhm.
of the research.
Well, and I think the important thing is when I started to teach this, and I started first with high school students. That's where I started, and I realized of how quickly they got it. Like, it was fascinating to do this in front of audiences of 500, 1,000 kids, because they would see this active, and I would actually in a high school assembly, I would actually have people act out the chairs. And so people could kind of see, like, I'm sitting there, my friend is sitting there, my girlfriend's sitting there, my dad's sitting here. Like, once they could kind of see it, like, I could watch their body language, they understood the concept. And then I would start going through examples on, okay, if you're sitting in this chair, this is more likely with what's going to happen. And their jaw would start to drop because, 80 to 90% of our decision making is subconscious. So a lot of us, we don't even realize, why am I making this decision? We're not even realize, but deep underneath it all is our mindset. And so one of the things that's really important to think about with the chairs is that nobody sits in one chair 100% of the time. Okay. So nobody sits even in the middle chair. I don't sit like I sit here the majority of the time, but I don't sit here every day. I will always, because I'm human. So I think part of it is actually having a realistic mindset around, okay, my goal is to sit in that chair 80 to 90% of my life. That's really where, and also to be aware when I fall to the left and be aware when I fall to the right. Okay? So this is an ongoing process. A lot of times when I coach and teach this, whether or not it's with C-suites or managers or parents or teenagers, people will say, "Okay, when I'm at school, I'm sitting here. When I get home, I sit here." Or when I'm with my friends, I sit here. When I get home, I sit over here. And so what I love to do is get people to kind of start looking at the different parts of your life and where are you sitting in different environments. And all of a sudden now we're starting to increase our awareness of ourselves. And it's like, okay, why do I fall to the left chair when I'm at school? What's happening? Why do I was doing, so we work with companies around the world on leadership development, and companies, love this because you can actually it's a great tool. It's a great leadership framework because it impacts who you hire, who you fire, who you promote. It's fascinating, and so one of the CEOs that I was working with, he said, "Okay, Karen, this makes sense. I love it. When I sit at work, I sit in the middle. I see myself sitting in the middle chair. When I get home, I find that I sit over here." And just him being aware of that, then actually realize and figuring out why do some of his kids actually sit over here and how his parenting style is now impacting his family life and his marriage. And just having that kind of awareness was phenomenal. And so step one is understanding, where do I sit the majority of the time? And the second part is then, how does that impact my life? What's the ripple effect? And once people start understanding that, then they get very motivated to change.
So the correlation between the life model of which this podcast is based off of
Right.
and the awareness that it takes to know which chair you're in is so correlated. So I'll give you an example. Part of where the life model came from is I used to do a self discovery where I did a brain dump and I would say, okay, why do I feel what are my goals? So it started with
Right.
goals
Okay.
and aspirations, and I would say, okay, what are my goals in my family, the people I love. And it was
Right.
very it wasn't as broad as love. That became a bigger, broader topic as I changed it over the years
Yeah.
and made it better. Impact became work and things. And it was
Mm,
very sometimes I was in complete control. Sometimes I felt completely out of control, but I would just brain dump faith and energy in all these categories, right? Then I would go through and evaluate and almost grade myself like, where am I imbalanced? What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? And I would get so granular that you know how little things start to eat at you. Like one of the conversations that always comes to my brain, how stupid and little it was. But I remember having to have the sex conversation with my oldest, and my wife was not going to do it. And I have two
right.
boys. They're now
Yeah.
17 and 14. They'll be 18 and 15 in a month. And
Okay.
and so I could still remember writing this down on the page because my nieces were hitting puberty and I didn't want my son to be the kid in class that didn't
Right.
understand it. And when you don't have sisters, some of that stuff becomes a big
Right.
deal. I told you I grew up around a lot of
Yes.
women. So this was something that was like, it was bothering me and making me feel like I was failing. And it was so small. But when I
Mm,
wrote it down, I started to evaluate, okay, then I can go through what are the steps I need to do to actually take action and feel like I'm in I'm moving in the right direction.
yes.
So it was as
Yeah.
simple as identifying it as an imbalance in my life, something I felt like I was failing at as a father, which is so
Right.
small,
Right.
and then having the awareness to know, "Hey, it's really small, but let's go ahead and do it."
Yeah.
And, you know, you
Yes.
have the conversation, you move it forward, you cross it off the list, and you
Yes.
don't feel these are things that I feel like it's correlated to your chairs because there are times where I feel really confident and
Yes.
comfortable and in control, and there are other times where you
Yes.
feel lost or needing. And I've used the life model to reorganize, reshuffle, and recalibrate my life on a regular basis. And that's why we put it out there to people. That's why we talk about it.
Love it. It's amazing. So a number of things. So one of the things that I'm hearing you're sharing a lot, but you're doing one of the strategies that is the most important for that middle chair, which is somebody who sits in the middle chair. It's not that they have a perfect life. It's not that everything is kind of like lining up. Everybody has external circumstances which we cannot control. What's different about that middle chair mindset is how they approach those circumstances, right? So, and the mindset of that middle chair is they have a more clarity on what they want. They have a vision for what they want in their life. They have clarity on this is with what I want. So self-awareness is number 1. Now I'm going to take initiative. I'm going to step on the gas. I'm not going to play the victim and life is difficult and life is hard. So they know with what they want, but they have but they take initiative. And so of all the different ways to kind of help ourselves and our children. And I've got teen boys as well that are 16 years old, so I know all about this age. One of the things and one of the best ways is to help ourselves and those around us actually set meaningful goals. There's actually five kind of metrics, okay, in terms of because people often ask me like is this genetic? It's not genetic. This is learned, which is great news for everybody. And there's five kind of core skills we need to sit in that middle chair. All right, and I love acronyms too. So the five core skills spells the acronym card. C stands for communication, A stands for attitude and goal setting, R stands for our relationship skills, D stands for our decision making and self-discipline skills, and S stands for our stress and emotion management skills. So there's 5 metrics, and I love scoring things because when we score things, just like you do, then you know where we're at, and we know with what area we have to work on. So we have a scorecard. It's free. People can go to our website, dkleadership.org. You can download it. It's free. You can do it for yourself. You can get your kids or your team to do it, and it helps you identify what are you doing according to these 5 skills? Where are you doing really well? What actually needs work? But one of the second one, like I talked about, the attitude and goal setting is one of the best ways to help ourselves sit in the middle chair. So I love that as an example that you just shared.
Well, and the attitude, it really goes back to your story, and that is in the 8th grade when you were told that you have a learning disability, instead of being the
Yeah.
victim, you became the victor, and you really decided, "What can I control?" And at the
Yes.
worst moments of the most challenging parts of my life, I have written down on a list, "What can
Yes.
I control? What can I not control?" And,
Yes.
you know, and for me, going through the most challenging times, this is where I feel like the cheat code sometimes is faith, because when there's
Mhm.
something bigger than myself, when there's something that's
Yes.
outside of myself, I'm not trying to control every attribute, every
Yes.
single thing. I'm actually surrendering and releasing some of that. And the older we get, the easier that becomes. The younger we are, the
Mhm.
harder it is, which is why I sent your TED talk to 5 people today. And that was because most of them are young. They're
Yeah.
17. They're girls that I admire, that I know their value, that I see it in them,
Right.
and
Right.
I love them. I want them to be successful, but I want them to hear someone else talking about something that I can't excuse me, I can't deliver to them.
Yes. Yes. And it is the secret sauce on success, however people define it. So, people can define success in many, many different ways. But really understanding that separation around accepting what I cannot control and also focusing on what I can control, and when I was diagnosed with my disability, as I shared in the TED Talk, I identified myself as really not left chair. Like, I sat in that left chair. I would have if someone had showed me these 3 chairs, I would have been like, "That's me." And so, for a while, I did play the victim. I did play the victim, and woe is me, and life is hard, and this isn't unfair, and really kind of having that mindset, life is not fair and not being willing to accept help. This is the other issue is that I absolutely refuse because I was so ashamed of it. I absolutely refused help. And this is really good for all parents listening that when you've got a strong-spirited child, which I am, you have to parent them a little differently. And the best way you parent them is you allow them to to basically make their own mistakes and a lot of times fall and fail miserably. And that's what I had to do. So once I kind of came to terms with I had this disability and my family, my parents are wonderful and they wanted me to get help. I refused it. I had to fail. My very first exam in high school was 37% in English. It's funny, I've written like 4 books and, I just tell people, you just get to a certain level, you hire other people. So you just
Oh, you
it's like
find
you
you
don't you
find
don't
your
have to be
talent.
all things to all people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, you don't have to be all things, but I figured out at least what I had to do and how my brain worked, and so in grade 9 was a mess. I was falling and failing all over the place, and because of the failure, that was my wake-up call. I needed to do something different, and so that was when I started really setting more realistic goals and starting to put up my hand and asking for help. That's when I really started feeling a shift, and that was a process, right? Like, that doesn't happen overnight, but that is a as understanding, and so when we work with leaders and we do leadership development in companies, it's so interesting, like, leadership to me is not a title, it's not a position, it's not degrees beside your name, it's a mindset. It's an attitude that we all learn, and you can learn it and start teaching it to children, So, like, today, I'm doing 5 different podcasts and keynotes. Yours is the first, and then we're doing a entrepreneurs one, we're doing a leadership one for about 50 different companies, and then tonight I finish off doing a parenting one on how do you teach confidence to parents, for their kids. So this is a topic that really transcends every single age group and every position that we all have.
Well, I'm glad we got to be first because that's, the sharpest that we ever are is in the very beginning of the day, so we're getting the best
You're
of
the
Dr.
first
Karyn
one,
Gordon
Scott.
today.
You're the first one for today.
That is
Yeah.
awesome, and, it makes me, I look back as a parent, and I look back at things that I changed and grew at. My oldest, I can tell you that because I grew up wanting affirmation and
Mm.
feeling like maybe I wasn't getting what I needed, I told my son, my oldest, how much I loved him, how much I was proud of him, how much he needs a little bit of that, but he probably, as I grew up and I learned, my youngest son in kindergarten, we held him back. He had we had to go to eye therapy. My wife knows the technical term. I don't know what it was, but he was seeing words blur together and we
Mm.
held him back. He got eye therapy from Dr. Westcott locally, who was amazing. And at the end, I'll never forget Dr. Westcott. I was telling Braden, my youngest, that we were so proud of him. And Dr. Westcott said, "You know what, Braden? You who did this?" And I listened. I was like, "This is so powerful." And Braden goes, "I did this." And he had a cake and he had his little glasses on and he I mean, he was so upset that he wasn't moving forward in class and he
Mm.
was so driven and disciplined, but he went every day and did this. He created this discipline.
Wow.
And Dr. Westcott says, "Who did this?" And he goes, "I did this." And he goes, "It's really important that you are proud of yourself."
Yes.
That
Yes.
is building the confidence, right? And so I
Yes.
started to think and change even the way I spoke to both my boys, whether they know it, whether they understand it. My youngest son is now playing in a soccer academy, and I go back to the discipline that he had at 5 years old and what was taught
Mm.
to him, and some of the things that he implements today that I do at 45 that he's
Right.
doing at 14 that
Yes.
I
Yeah.
wish that kids saw and were able to see earlier because it's like a cheat code. But just
It
the "I'm
is.
proud of you" versus "you should be proud of yourself" and the confidence
Yes.
shift that had in my sons, so
Mm.
amazing.
Well, and it's interesting because everything we're really talking about is under the umbrella on what's called emotional intelligence. Okay, that's kind of like the clinical big word. And if people get the scorecard on our website, you will see it. It really is. It is the cheat sheet for what exactly is emotional intelligence. It's these 5 core skills. It spells the acronym cards. And the way I describe it is it's like a language. So if I want to learn how to speak French, I want to go to France and I want to surround myself with other people who speak French. The best way to learn the middle chair, the best way to learn these 5 core skills of emotional intelligence is you surround yourself with other people that are actually also in the same place because you'll learn it. And the powerful thing with children, and this is one of the reasons I love teaching it to kids, is it's like a language. If they can learn it really young, they actually pick it up faster, way faster than adults. Like, I can take somebody who is in that left chair. I know what to do to help them move in that middle chair. I know what to do, and I can do it faster when I've got a child than I've actually got an adult. Because the toxic mindset hasn't been going on long enough. So I can, we can course correct it actually really fast. And so with what you're talking about with your son, the fact that, he had the goal, that he put his head down, he had the meaningful goal, he steps on the gas, and they actually say a lot of times self-discipline is one of the secret sauces. It's the fourth of the five metrics. So you think about with what your son did, right? So he had the goal, so he had the attitude, he had also the discipline, right? The decision making and self-discipline to kind of keep doing it. That's now also going to impact in terms of his overall confidence and his overall stress. So how did he feel when he went into the next grade? When he went into the first grade and he could actually see properly, he probably felt less stressed, less anxious. He can actually see things and understand things. So him just taking that one step, he's now actually building 3 of the 5 metrics. So it's cool. We think, well,
It
it's
is
about
cool.
eyes, but it's not about eyes. This
No.
is about it. The eyes is just the example on how he was learning and building these 5 metrics. So that's the piece that I feel is really important is that, when I'm working with leaders or entrepreneurs or, professionals, parents, and they'll say, "This is the topic." I'm like, "Hey, this is just the topic. Let's use that topic, but let's figure out how we can actually develop these kind of core skills as we're talking about that topic." So we're kind of doing 2 things at once because the topic that I think is not probably an issue for him anymore. But what's continued is that he's actually developed these EQ skills, which is really exciting.
Yeah, both of my sons, and like you said, you have teenagers, so you understand. They're great at different things and they pick each other up for different things. I've heard you talk about birth order and how the youngest looks up to the oldest. The hardest thing for me as a dad is when they're together and I'm the butt of their jokes. Like I'm confident, I'm
Right.
sitting in the night
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
middle chair and I
Yeah.
know that I'm good and I'm fine and I love them and then they start just going at me and I'm like, "Man, this is one of the hardest things from a parenting perspective because I know that it's just how they're gathering their own confidence and they're messing with us, but we're playing
Yeah.
there. A lot of times it's like, oh, hey, dad, let's play that song that you think is so great. Or, hey, dad, you want
Yeah.
to watch a show? And like the youngest picks on me and the oldest thinks it's hilarious. And
Yeah.
and I deep down, I love that they're building that relationship. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, you don't gain your worth from whether or not
Yeah.
they think that this is
Yes.
that you're cool enough or so,
Yes.
but it is an
Yes.
interesting dynamic.
It is an interesting dynamic, and again, sitting in that middle chair as a parent, people can and this is a really common theme that I see when we work with a lot of business leaders, like, a lot of the businesses that we work with, they're like, "Okay, can we talk, like, for 30 minutes about my team and about scaling and building and developing my managers, and then can I just spend the last 30 minutes I wanna talk about my wife and my kids. Can we just" I'm like, "Sure," and so that's literally how we do our sessions, right? And what's interesting is a lot of the business leaders that I work with, a lot of them feel fairly confident in their business skills. We're working with, some very fast growing organizations. So they feel like very competent, middle chair. I know what I'm doing. But when we get into the personal side, a lot of them like, I don't know what I'm doing. I was just in Whistler not too long ago, and I was leading with 40 CEOs and their daughters. It was a 4-day retreat, and I was kind of walking them through these different exercises. And this is a very common theme with a lot of leaders is that they feel really good in one part, but actually not the other part. And I think part of the biggest thing with sitting in that middle chair is I am enough, period. So yes, I want to have a great relationship with my kids and build a business and friendships and all of that, but my self-worth is not based on the outcome. And and so when we have that mindset, it just tends to give more serenity and some peace. So if the outcome turns out differently, it's like my self-esteem doesn't plummet with it. It feels like there's a stability to it versus kind of this up and down yo-yo effect. So it's a really important piece for parents because a lot of parents will think I'm okay if my kids like me. I'm okay if and all of a sudden then that mindset actually puts them into a bit of an anxious posture and kids sense that. and then it can become a bit of a self-sabotage situation.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's constant learning. I think we talk a lot about imperfection and owning the imperfections of
Yes.
ourselves. I mean, it's really important that I'm aiming to be the best version of myself every day, and I'm trying to get better and working at it. And I want them to do the same thing. I want my wife and I to do the same thing in our relationship.
Right.
We are not who we were. We've changed together and we've changed in different
Right.
ways, things that I love more today and things that I loved more yesterday, and there are things that are challenging as we get older, but as we look at all that, growth is this transformational thing that when you look back at it, I love the Dr. Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan's book, The Gap and the Gain, because it's something as
Mhm.
a leader I have to tell myself on a regular basis. If I live in the gap and I'm constantly setting a boundary
Yeah.
of something in the future, and we do this. I mean, I've done it for years
Right.
and I'm so much better
Yeah.
today than I ever was. But if I'm setting that goalpost and I'm kicking a 30-yard field goal, and now I want to kick a 35-yard field goal and a 40-yard field goal, or if I make $1 million, then I've succeeded. If I make $10 million, I've succeeded,
Right.
and it never ends, right? But the
Right.
gain is looking at where you started from to where you are today. And if you look
Yes.
back at that, the gratitude, the success, the feeling of hey, imperfection's fine, but look at the journey.
Mhm.
It's so much more powerful, and that's hard for parents, and it's really hard in relationships.
It is, and it's a great example on so many again, in that left and that right chairs, they're so focused on with what's not working, with where they're failing or the imperfection. And the middle chair mindset, it's not like a it's not like a toxic positivity. Like, people sometimes kinda question me about that. Is that like a toxic positivity, or you're kind of, like, negating in terms of real things that are a problem? It's not. It's just seeing it for both it's seeing the ledger on both sides. It's like, yes, there are some issues that have to get addressed. Yes, there are some, things that we have to kinda work on. Yes, there are some gaps. And this is also the gratitude place of gratitude. Like, I'm so thankful that ABC happened, and I'm so thankful that I've got resources to help me with the gap. And so I always try to kind of when I coach, whether it's individuals or teams, I'm always trying to kind of get them to make sure we've got to look at both sides of it. It's both. It's not either or. It's both. And so again, somebody who's sitting in that middle chair, it's like, yes, there are issues, but there are also options in terms of what we can do towards those issues. And the more that we can actually kind of focus on that, and it kind of goes back to that thing that we're talking about before, which is focus on what you can control and accept what you can't. And
With
that goes to business, relationships, parenting, friendships, fitness, finances, all of it. Doesn't take change the topic, but that principle is super powerful and very empowering. I mean, that's the biggest thing when I coach, whether it's individuals or teams, they feel so empowered the more they can actually do that. It's like, yes, I'm gonna accept I can't control this. I can control this. I'm gonna like really push, step on the gas towards that, and that kind of just tends to fuel more that kind of middle chair mindset.
How do you feel as a mother you can take your research and apply it. You have teenagers, you've
Yes.
lived in this space, you're an expert by all accords in every level. Like my data sheet here is huge, and um, but when you apply it in real life and you see it, what is a
Yes,
technique
it's a
that
great
you're doing?
question. So it's interesting, when I started this work, I was not married and I had no children. And in Canada, I became known as a teen expert. I was in my 20s, I started writing books, I was doing television shows, I was producing shows, I was traveling across the country, I had, like, great sponsors that were sponsoring my work, and I was doing this all before I was married and I had kids. And I remember, in many conferences I was speaking at, whether it's school conferences or educational conferences, people would say, "You just wait till you have your own. You just wait." And it would irritate me. It's like, "What do you think?" Like, I specialize in this, I have a practice, I know what I'm doing, and I thought to myself, "I know what I'm gonna do when I have my own kids. I'm gonna read my own books, and I'm gonna listen to my own CDs." And because it's one thing for us to teach, it's another thing for us to apply, right? So I thought, I'm going to just be more intentional to make sure that I am applying what I'm telling everybody else to do. And, my kids my husband and I were just talking about this last night. We have such great kids. I am so proud of my kids. They're actually home today. They have a snow day, so they're
Oh,
downstairs. Yeah, we live north of Toronto. We've got, like, lots of snow right now. So I've got 2 amazing kids. Am I a perfect mother? Absolutely not, and I will be the first to admit it, and they would tell you that actually as well. But they would also say that I'm a great mom, but I think part of it is that my husband and I really try very hard to apply and practice what we preach. So, who you're seeing and hearing right now is who I try to be when I'm with my husband, so I'm a pastor's daughter, and so I know what that feels like to have a parent where you see the parent on stage. And so my father did an amazing job at saying, I'm still your I've got a different role when I'm a pastor, I'm up on and I'm preaching. But I'm gonna be imperfect. I am imperfect, but I'm gonna try to own my stuff as fast as possible, and I'm gonna apologize as fast as possible, and I'm open to feedback. And so I feel like I had a really good model on how you can have a parent who has a public job and, who they see, and are they really the same person when they're actually at home? And in my case, my father was yes. Like, he did a really good job at kind of separating those boundaries, and so I feel like I had a really good example of that because I know a lot of pastors' kids, their situation is disastrous because there's tons of hypocrisy, and it's all this acting game. I didn't have that experience. Mine was very positive, and so I've tried really, really hard to do the same thing with my kids. The joke that they would often say to me, this is definitely the area that I always have to be the most careful of, is that I have so much content in my brain and I just want to teach them so
yeah,
much, right? So the biggest obstacle, and they joke with me, like, Mom, we don't need another TED talk. Okay, so I'll pick them up in the car and like also they're like, we don't need another TED talk. Or they'll get home, or like, yeah, mom just went on. She just gave me her 50th TED talk. Cause I
yeah,
get in these like little I start spinning about like, okay, have you thought about this? Or and I have to be really mindful to be a mom and not a coach, and a mom and not a speaker with them. But they're good, and I've given them permission to flag me on it. Like, when I kinda cross that line, we make it into a joke, but it is really fun to apply this. Really fun to apply it, and I think they would say that they benefit a lot from the learning of it, but it is a little bit of a joke on how many TED Talks. This is why
yeah.
you have to keep working, Scott. Like, if it wasn't if I didn't have like, I need an outlet. I've got all this, like, content in my brain. I want this is my purpose is to impact worldwide. I want people to learn these things and learn these tools so they can really achieve their success in life, and so I'm so thankful I have an outlet because otherwise my poor kids would be, like, hearing me out way more than they actually do.
Yeah, you don't become, high performers, we use that term a lot, but you don't become great at something without having hyper focus. And when you're hyper focused on something that you really feel you have a great handle on, it
Yes.
is innate in you to wanna teach it. And the
Yes.
hardest thing is when you love somebody as much as we do our children, there's
Yes.
nobody that we wanna feed information more to than them, and there's nobody less willing to listen
I know.
all the way through. But then
Yeah.
I get these moments as a father where I'll see my wife and I will be with friends, or we'll hear a story at school, and the boys will be saying something and I'm like, "Ooh, that's our mindset. Ooh,
Yes.
that's what we believe. Oh, they're standing up for someone that's having a hard time, or they're doing things that we believe that are making them great humans." And that's really my goal, is to help them become a great human, and they can choose the path and the
Yeah.
success. And if they're not
Yeah.
hyper focused like us, that's
Yeah.
okay too.
Yes.
But I think that's the other thing I think is really interesting about what you said about the pastor's daughter is I think so many people live an inauthentic life.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is they're so worried about the outside appearance
Yes.
that the outside and the inside become so different.
Yes.
And I could say right here on this show, I'll say it over and over again. People send me videos of cuts from podcasts or things that I've done, and they're like, "This really impacted me." I get texted from
Mm,
buddies, guys I would never imagine would actually say, "Thank you for sharing this." And I rewatch it, and sometimes it's the very information I needed at that moment
mhm,
to help me.
right.
And so, I'm shocked all the time at how empowering that is to just go back. Like, you've created so many great things. What a great database to look back and to enjoy the gain, to bring us back
Yeah,
to that point, to
yeah,
enjoy the
yeah,
gain
yeah,
and then replicate it and utilize it. And then when you can't, use your friends and
yes.
you've created all these great accomplices and great people you've worked with. Like it's also not a bad idea. I imagine you use them when you need them for your children in ways that will help them grow.
Totally, and I really believe in the village approach, that we really need a lot of people, or not a huge amount, but a good hand, maybe, 4 or 5 great people in the middle chair to help guide our children. Because I know a lot, but I don't know everything. I also know that there's certain topics that my kids are much more open to hear it from my husband. I also know that, roles of grandparents are very powerful. Teachers are really powerful. Camp counselors are very powerful. So what I have really found that's very important is to ask permission to when I'm actually giving advice to my kids, and so that they really have control over when they're ready, because you have to be ready to hear information, but then also making sure that we try to put them in environments where I know and I trust the other adults, that they're gonna be kinda getting the message, maybe done in a little different way. We launched, I'm so excited about this. For years, we've been working with businesses and teams, and then we had a lot of entrepreneurs and parents actually saying, "I really want our kids to learn more from you." So, we actually launched just last month a leadership academy where parents can actually start, and we can actually start coaching their kids on different leadership principles, because I just believe that sometimes we just need to hear another voice. We need to have somebody else at the table a little bit sometimes to be speaking into our children's life. And in the summer, we actually had our kids, there was about 3 or 4 books, leadership books we wanted them to read and do a little book report on. And it was kind of fun. My one son, he's like, "'Cause mom, there's so much in this book that is really things that you've taught." I'm like, "Yes, that's
And
what happened."
what book is it?
Okay,
Do you
so,
remember?
oh my goodness, there was, okay, so the one was actually with it was one of Dan Sullivan's book. I love his work, by the
Yeah, he's
way, so that was kind
phenomenal.
of fun. It was fun that you actually mentioned that. What was the one? It was, The Power of Focus. That's a Jack Canfield one. That was one. Um, there was, oh goodness, you put me on the spot. What
It's okay if
is
you think of them.
Yeah,
You could tell
it
you
was
don't have to.
the one was the Dan Sullivan one was the Dan Sullivan one, and The Power of Focus is actually probably one of the easier ones for teenagers to kind of really grasp. Um, uh, but yeah, it's a good exercise, and there's, like, different ways, right? There's different ways in terms of with what we can do to kind of in terms of help our kids, but just putting our kids in environments where we know they're gonna hear great counsel and great wisdom from somebody else that's not us.
Yeah, it's so interesting. One of the biggest things I try to do with my boys is also to not set limits. That one of
Mm,
the things that I think I struggled with growing up was that scarcity mindset, thinking that
yeah,
there wasn't enough to go around, and that holds you back from your truth. It holds you back from being able to really
yes,
identify that
yeah,
purpose, that impact. And so I openly talk about things that a lot of people probably won't, even financial things,
mm,
decisions, things that I'm struggling with. Even if I have the financial means to do it, this is a challenge I have. And I'm showing them that it's hard no matter what stage of the game you're at, no matter how far you think you're going to get, you're going to have these challenges. And we have these conversations that I hope one day will pay off. I don't know that we understand it now, but it's almost like reading the books and having them report on it. They're seeing your work in the work that is, really correlated to everything that you would want them to believe in. These great leaders.
well, and also, you think about all of these skills that are so critical for success, however people define it, and success in our businesses, in our marriage, in our parenting, in our friendships, in our mental health, in our physical well-being, in our finances. What's beautiful, this is what I love. I love reading, I love researching, I love seeing the patterns. I love finding patterns and realizing, "Oh, okay, if we can just focus on these 5 skills, we're actually gonna be successful." Doesn't matter so I love simplicity. I love simplicity, and I love taking research, finding the pattern, and then teaching very simple tools that people can actually take action. Because where I find that there's really been gaps, certainly in my profession, is that there's a lot of research, but what do we do with the research? It sits on dusty library shelves, right? Like, in people's computers. And so the power when we talk about impact, because that's my purpose, is to create impact. When I think about how do I reach the impact, it's always taking science but making it practical so people kind of know with what to do with it. So that's why I love the scorecard, the 5 metrics. I find it's a wonderful free action step people can do right away. The TED Talk, parents and educators. And actually, I forgot to mention this. So the book came out first. Okay, so the book came out first, and then it did very well, hit number 2 on the Wall Street Journal. And then after the book came out, I was asked to do a TED Talk. The book is a business book. It's a leadership business book. But when I was asked to do the TED Talk about the chairs, I wanted to do it a little different so that because my vision was that parents could be on the sofa watching it with their kids, and teachers could be in their classroom watching it together, and teams, entrepreneurs could be in the boardroom watching with their teams. I literally had visions of these 3 different groups. So the TED Talk is it explains the chairs in for all ages. And so we have on our website as well, we have free discussion questions. And so that's again another practical tool is, hopefully, this interview has been inspiring, but I want people to take action. Like,
Yeah.
watch the TED Talk, but use the questions, because when the TED Talk came out, it was very interesting. When the TED Talk came out, we filmed it in like February, March. By the time it was published and released publicly, I think it was May. It was just before Mother's Day. And my boys, they said to me, they're like, "What do you want for your Mother's Day?" I said, "I know what I want. I want flowers from the garden, homemade card, and I really wanna watch my TED Talk and download my discussion questions and do the discussion questions together." And so they're like, "Okay." So they loved how prescriptive it was. So we watched my TED Talk and we printed our and we went through every single one of those questions. We had the most amazing family conversation, and they were very honest around, "Mom, you sometimes, you sit here, but sometimes you're in that right chair. When you get stressed," like, they were very honest around their observation with where I sit, where my husband sits. They did amazing revelations on where they sit, where their friends have sat, friends that kind of sometimes move around, and we ended up having this most amazing conversation. And that's to me, that's the impact, right? That we can have this conversation. Now, this is inspiring everybody listening. Okay, good. I want to do that. And so that's my encouragement with everyone listening is like take action, right? Like this is great. These are great tools. Take action on really how to help yourself and those around you really sit in that middle chair.
What's the website? Give us the website again for everyone listening.
Sure. It's www.dk, which stands for Dr. Karen Leadership.org, O-R-G. So in Canada, ORG is very popular. I know in the US, it's not as popular. So people are always like, so then what happens? People go to .com. So I don't know. I'm sending a lot of people to like a wrong website. So it is .org, O-R-G stands for organization. Yeah, dkleadership.org. But there's tons of resources and it's free. And this is a way for people to start taking action on developing these amazing skills.
It's really interesting because at the end of our lives, at the end of our days, what we really want is the success of our families. What we want is the
Right.
people that we love the most to have the impact that to feel the impact that we put out into the world. And what you just described is exactly what most families are aiming to attain. And that is
Right.
open conversation, growing together, learning from each other. And I think everybody should take a look at Dr. Karyn's website. I think that we should follow her work, that we should learn more from her, listen to a couple of the podcasts. If you do nothing else, download the TED Talk and share it with one person. Because in
Mm,
the beginning of it, she talks about a 17-year-old girl that came in and kind of sat down with her. And I could tell you right now, I remember and know way too many 17-year-old young
yeah.
women that don't know their value.
Yeah.
And we on social media, on everything, are projecting something that is not valuable to them and who they are. And I'd love for them to hear the truth of identifying how valuable you are. And this goes for young men as well, but I just feel like it's
Yes.
very evident with who you were describing, and I think it's beautiful, and I'm grateful. I know you have somewhere else to be, and I know we have a strict timeline, and I'm so grateful for the time that you give me. You have 4 more things to do today. I'm one of 5. So, Dr. Karyn, thank you so much for joining me. I could talk to you for hours, so, maybe we'll do another one in the future. We could dive deeper onto some of the other topics.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott. So appreciate.
All right, grateful for having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you liked it, there's more where this one came from. Click here and enjoy some more.